Tharun is joining us. As some of you who've been watching this before would know that we usually bring leaders and HR professionals from companies who've been implementing remote. Today, we are bringing an expert and an SME in the space of mental wellness and well-being. Tarun, thanks for joining. And this topic is certainly coming out on the top, bubbling up to the top as a very important and a very critical topic for many HR leaders across many organizations, which is why we thought that it might be ideal to bring somebody like Tarun to hear his views, points, and also should be the takeaways from this meeting should be some techniques, strategies, and approaches that you can implement in your organization to troubleshoot wellness and mental illness issues and how you could address them. So, Tarun, again, welcome to the show. We'll start off with your quick introduction. Tarun, over to you.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you so much for having me here, Shyam sir. And it's pleasure actually going and being on show with Shyam sir, and especially with GoFloaters, because there has been my go-to place, like where we go and book a co-working space with the help of GoFloaters. And coming to our introduction, I'm Tarun, like the founder of this employee well-being company called Wanderfly. So we provide proactive basis employee well-being program. So like what I mean when if I tell like proactive basis, we take the stress levels of the employees, and according to that we customize the programs as per the requirement. And in the programs, like what and all we give, like we provide meditation, yoga, team building activities, mental health experts, psychologists, psychiatrists. So that's where like our line has been. And recently we have added two other segments to us. Like one is the posh consultancy, which is a mandatory thing for any company like more than 10 employees. And apart from that, we also do this employee gifting and leadership training. So we that's a quick introduction about my company. And that's what like we are a batch of like three people like who have been doing this from the past 1 year. On August 4th we have become just 1 year old company. But yes,
Congrats.
having my co-founder who is an expert in psychology, like he has done his masters in psychology, and like that's where the whole idea have come, and like that's where we had been working on. And we are blessed to actually be in part of like few companies like doing the well-being activities for them, these things. Yeah.
Super, super. Great, Tarun. Thanks for the intro. And again, so I just want to start off with a question, right? Is that I mean, these keywords, right? The keywords of mental well-being and employee well-being and mental wellness, right? So these two have become, I mean, almost every blog that you read about remote work, every blog or everything, any podcast that you listen on remote work or hybrid work, without the mention of these two words, the podcast does not end, right? So why has this become such an important topic? Right? It's not like this. The problems didn't exist before, right? Why do you think has suddenly surfaced to the top as one of probably the topmost priority for any HR professional is to look at this? And in fact, I mean from our own experience also, right? A lot of HR professionals that work with GoFloaters apart from solving productivity and collaboration, what they want to solve for is employee engagement and employee well-being, and which is also the reason why they kind of give them access to co-working spaces. So, why, according to you, why do you think this has become the foremost topic of the zeitgeist, if I have to call it right, of today's workplace cultures?
Yeah. So, firstly, I would actually you have already mentioned the answer. It's not right now. It's not the specific issue or something, but it's there for a while right now. But COVID has actually made everybody made sit at home, work for long hours, and people had gone through those issues. And above all, the awareness have started more. Let it
Right.
be from the company side. Let it be in the newspapers, on the media, where people are talking about women health, where people are talking about mental health, stress, depression. And if you see, like government has come up with their own helpline numbers, so the awareness have started more. And
Mhm.
COVID have actually played the role of this spark plug, or like spark like which has lit. Consider like
Right.
around 2020, it has been like 2020 to 2022. Like if you see the growth, like people are working for more hours, but the stress levels, like just sitting in front of the laptops, are not
Right.
exactly finding exactly. There's no time difference between personal life and also the work life. And this has actually triggered things. And apart from that, obviously awareness, people have come. I don't actually tell it like the complete awareness have come, but yes, comparatively before 2020 what has happened, but right now yes, people of this generation are actually speaking out regarding this. That's a very good sign. When Because when we see it as an because that's where like everybody comes from, especially the health industry, where people look at this industry as like some people have to normalize talking about mental health, people have to talk about stress, these all things. So yeah, I would personally feel COVID is one of the reasons, and awareness is the second reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the point that you mentioned is quite significant, right? That the fact that why not only did COVID accelerate the awareness part of it, right? Because generally, right, generally people started to focus more on themselves during COVID, right? Whether it was exercises or this healthy eating, right? I think COVID gave all of us the opportunity to look inwards and look at what is a wholesome experience for us as life, right? And we all started to see life as a very short-term thing, and then we don't want to kind of assume that it's going to be here forever, and hence the focus back on self started to begin, and that's probably the reason, right? And certainly, work from home has definitely is more stressful, has been proven to be more stressful for many people, right? Loneliness, stress. So it's a very all very valid point, right? So now let's shift gears, Tarun, into the crux of the topic, right? So when companies approach Vanderfly, right? What kind of challenges, what kind of problems do they approach you with, right? Uh, at an individual level, at a team level, at an organization level, what do they, and again, though we are specifically talking about employee wellness for remote teams, maybe this question you can kind of make it both for in-office teams, hybrid teams, and remote teams, right? What kind of challenges do you typically start hearing from your clients, your prospects, and part one of my question. Part two of my question: how do you start to engage with such clients, right? What do you what how do you and your team start to diagnose the problem, get to the bottom of the root cause of the problem, and what kind of interventions do you start working on to solve these problems?
Got it. So actually, like you have made it very easy for me, because you actually went up to individual level, then organization level, the complete company wise level. See,
Right,
first of all, right now, if you see the trends, and like wherever many surveys are coming out, as you clearly mentioned, like there's no podcast like without talking about mental health. They're not ending about this. If you just understand the trend itself, like companies are really investing a lot on this, especially because this directly impacts the productivity of the company. This directly impacts the revenue of the company.
right.
So if I want to just like understand, like if I want to just go back to your question, like where you have clearly asked me that how what prospects are actually coming, like what are the problems what they face. So one of the major issues, like
So
what.
maybe I'll break it down a little further, right?
Mhm.
When HRs, so I mean, head of HRs or the business partner HR BPs come to you, what what kind of symptoms are they seeing? Maybe I'll break it down because I asked a very broad-ended question, right? We'll break it down into smaller questions, right? What kind of symptoms do these companies start to see, right? Before the alarm bells start ringing and saying, hey, we need to engage somebody to, intervene, right? So what kind of symptoms do leaders start to see at organizations, which kind of indicates to them that employees are at higher stress or mental well-being is actually being challenged?
Got it. So first and foremost thing, like what people actually look at their company level is something is that absenteeism. That's one of the major factor, like what people look at. And
Right.
second thing is like the productivity of the employees. Like for
Okay.
example, a person have worked very good in the last quarter, and he's not able to do, he or she is not able to do in the next quarter, even though that's
All
not
right.
a direct sign of stress or direct sign of depression, but that's a very key insight to actually look at the personal level and find out, like, can HR can actually go and like approach them, like, is there anything wrong is happening? Or if they're
Got
not
it.
able, if they are not feasible in that way, like going and approaching, like they come to us, they actually ask us, like, Tarun, like, can I actually find out like what's happening in my company? Because as I clearly mentioned at the start of our introduction, like we are an proactive company, not the reactive company. So
Mm-hmm.
what
Correct.
what I tell when I tell, like, we are not a reactive company, because we actually enter the company even before the problem exists, or even it's not like something we give the solution and like somebody can come and take the solution. No, we don't do that.
Right. Right.
So our way of working is completely different. We actually take the stress levels of the employees through scientifically approved approaches. We take the stress levels, and then according to that we actually find, and then we give the average stress level report of the company. such that the
Right.
HR person will be able to understand where the wrong is going on and what's the
Right.
situation of it, and like what actually we have to do for that. Because that's how like we differ from the market, and that has been working for us. And second thing, absenteeism. So when I tell about absenteeism, I want to take one step backwards to it. That's where the stress comes in. So
Mm-hmm.
when there's a lot of work involved, when there's an long working hours involved, when there's more screen time is happening, that's where those are situations like where the stress might actually hit the person. So when
Right.
actually the stress hits, then this person have to feel will actually feel that, oh, I'm working for a lot, and but I'm not getting what I want. So what shall I do? Okay, I'll take some leave. That's what happens. So that's the start of any trigger. So once
Got it.
the trigger hits, they take absenteeism, which actually leads to burnout, and again that burnout will actually lead to depression, which will actually ultimately affect the productivity of the company. So that's how like many companies have actually come up with us, and that's how like we have been working for a while right now.
Super, super. So I think those are two simple things to measure, right? I mean, it's not like rocket science to know that,
Exactly.
right? It's, I mean, and again, the point is like you have to see the patterns. It's not about this person was probably not taking so many leads before, but now they are, right? Or this person has been a consistent performer, but now their levels are dropping down,
Yeah,
I mean, down for some time, right? So
exactly.
those patterns and identifying the patterns, and those patterns are like not just sporadic, but they are across the organization. You're able to see a trend, then it kind of should trigger the alarm bells. So again, that's a good telltale sign to tell a forecasting, right? Like they say, before the storm, you get a lot of wind.
Yeah,
So
but
that's
I'm
the
not
wind,
thinking,
right?
yeah.
The storm is brewing somewhere, right? The wind speed picks up first. So
Exactly.
now coming to the point, right? And we did our own team stress level assessment with your team, right? We did that quickly, right? Before between, I mean, before I mean, rather than getting into a lot of details, if you can just peel the layers and in simple words, how do you identify the stress level of a team, right? You talked about a very scientific and approved way in which you
Yeah,
approach it, right?
yeah,
Uh, just a little bit of logically, if you can break that apart and say, how do you kind of, I mean, take some examples, and how do you kind of identify if a team's average stress levels in the low to mid to high to really high,
yeah.
alarming kind of a range, right? How do you approach it?
Definitely. So as I've clearly mentioned, it's a scientifically approved thing. Like this, anybody can find it out. These things, and also we use two methods here. One is definitely what we call perceived stress scale. So where there'll be a set of questionnaires like which is prepared by our own psychologists. Like they'll be giving out to the people. So that's why the Go floaters have got it. And
Right.
you people were kind enough to actually give me the give me the answers and everything. So
Right.
we actually calculate once we get the answers based on, because what happens in the stress levels is we actually calculate based on the previous month. The perceived stress scale works on the previous month levels.
Right.
So according to that, we have a basic questions like where I can tell like one of the question would be, are you able to are you there controlling all your situations like what's happening in the last month with you? That's a basic
Right.
question, but it
Right.
gives a lot of insight for a psychologist to understand whether it's an yes, no, never, one, like one, two, three. Because this thing, a psychologist or an approved person like who can actually understand, like who went through all this process, will be able to understand this thing. There's
Right.
one process like what we do, and the second process is graphology. So graphology is something like where we give a paragraph to actually write. We'll ask the members to actually write it down,
Mm-hmm.
and then we actually, our psychologists will sit, and the graphology, like who have done masters in psychology, like they sit down and they actually decode like where these people are having stress levels and like what's actually
Okay.
happening in that thing. So these are the most commonly used stress levels to methods like what we use in our company as of now. But yes,
Right.
it's always an approach based, and it's always a new way. We are trying to find other ways to actually find the things. Yeah,
Got it. Got it. Sure. So now let's say a company is engaged you to run these things, right? If you've come up with a report card saying that within your company, these teams have high level of stress. These teams are in the critical stage. These teams are okay, right? You kind of have identified a pattern, right? Now, what kind of intervention happens after that, right? How do you approach? So let's say, and is it based on the team? Is it based on whether they're remote or in office? Is it based on whether they are tech, non-tech, creative people? Is the approach any different? Or why don't you walk us through some examples of how do you go about uh, addressing these problems?
got it. So, what would actually we suggest for an HR and a people person is in a company? So, we actually ask them to give the stress levels separately. Consider, well, I'll give you a straight away example, like where we have done a case study with a pretty young startup, like having around 60, 70 people. So, where we clearly ask them, that's a B2C company. So, where the salespeople have the targets to meet. So
Right.
when there's a targets to meet, we can understand like what actually people will go through in that, because
Right.
that's a common notion like what people have, like when you have something target to reach it, that's on obviously anxiety built in already,
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
the deadlines comes very closer, our anxiety level goes up. So that's how people works. That's a common
Right.
tendency.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we actually ask those people to give a separate stress level assessment, and we have got that thing. And separately again for the marketing team, because after sales, it's next the marketing team, like which has got more stress levels according to like whatever we have found out as of now, and what are the different service styles. And we actually separate the things, then accordingly we actually give the interventions. And you have asked me like what are the interventions, different types of interventions.
So
So
I want to register that the tech team is the chill team. They don't get stressed out. Looks like
no,
it's
like
sales and the marketing teams that you seem to be highlighting more. Yeah.
exactly. So not necessarily. I know you're an tech founder, and obviously like your stress levels are high, but obviously, and if you get a PRD, you have to go through the PRD, build a thing, and like hit the stage, hit to the product stage. I completely understand that thing. That is the reason like, we actually concentrate on batch by batch and group by group
So
and
you
team by team.
cohorts. You create cohorts based on their roles,
Exactly.
and then try to group them and then analyze that at the group level. Okay. Cool. Understand.
Exactly. And
Okay. So yeah, interventions.
yeah, what are the different types of interventions like what we do? Some interventions, for example, consider a team like which is having an low to or like moderate level stress levels. Like for them, like we actually suggest them to do meditation and yoga, which actually we provide on a daily basis, where certified yoga trainers and meditation trainers would come up with them and do the things. And for a
Right.
remote team, we actually add one more thing to the meditation and yoga, that is team building activities.
Right.
What we have also done for GoFloaters, like what we have done for it, because it's a
Got it.
complete
Yeah.
remote team where we want to get everybody on the panel, where we want to understand about each other. We add that one more pinch of it. And for the people like who are actually having the alarming stress levels, we actually get on a personal report card for them, send it to them personally, which we make sure that no HR is knowing like who actually having the most stress levels, or anything. But the
Right.
person like who is it going on, we actually make sure the whole company goes through the same process, where then we give meditation, yoga, team building activities, and the counseling sessions.
Got it.
So before counseling sessions, like we have one small thing like what we actually change it. That is, we give common sessions where
Mm-hmm.
we call in certified psychologists to, and we'll tell them to speak on what is depression, what is stress, because the definitions of this is very critical to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
stress followed by depression, there's a very slight difference, but the huge impact. When you're in
Right.
stress,
Right.
that's a controllable thing, but when you're in depression, that takes a lot of effort to actually come out of that thing,
Come out of it. Yes. Yeah.
come out of it. So that is where before that, like even before sending to counseling sessions, we actually give them a common session to everybody in the company to make them understand what are these things, what is stress, what is well-being, what is mental health, everything.
Got
Because
it.
once people understand this thing, they'll be knowing like what actually they are going through.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? So you first have to recognize that you've got a problem, right?
Exactly.
Before you seek out for help, right? Otherwise, if you're in denial, that's not going to help an individual seek help.
Exactly.
So now coming to switching gears to specifically remote teams, right? And again, remote teams, again, COVID has proven that if you're 100% remote, you're sitting in your own place, not seeing, not socializing, not meeting others, right? It does create a lonely atmosphere. It does create an atmosphere of higher stress because you're not able to draw the boundaries of when your work ends and your life has to start and so on and so forth, right? But I think as humans generally we're getting better because if you see a lot more people are working remotely, so now each of us are figuring out how to draw the line, right? How to draw boundaries, how to not ensure that work is spilling over and all that, right? So now coming to as an individual, I'm a remote worker, right? Uh, what would you recommend as tips slash ideas that I could implement right on my work style to ensure that I mean obviously everybody wants to do prevention before cure, right? So how do I prevent this before this kind of takes over my brain and starts to take me down the depression side of things, right? As an individual, what do I do, right? How do I take care of, how do I do a self-assessment, right? Before Vanderfly teams comes in and rolls out this questionnaire and for me to answer. What is the simple things that I can do to ensure that I'm keeping things under control?
Got it. So I think that's a very specific questions, like specific question regarding the remote work. So first thing, like what we have to observe is like, do we have a personal life? So there's something called like personal life and work life. So when you're completely working remote, what happens is like, do you have the difference? That's the first question. Like everybody have to ask, like who are completely working,
Right,
and with this question they'll be able to understand no, like no is something. So then comes the second question. Okay, I don't have the personal time for us, if at all, if they're not having personal time. So okay, I don't have it, so what should I do? So then go for something like, how go for finding like what is your screen time, how much screen time you're spending, how
right,
much time you're sitting on your laptop, how much time you're spending on internet, what's actually how much time you're working. So just you can just find a stopwatch, like just put it over, just understand on an 1 week, then you can actually understand, get the average out of this thing. You'll be
right,
definitely able to understand. So once you understand these two things, you're very sure that you're much more into the work, not in yourself. So that's an alarming thing for yourself.
right, right,
So once you find out that thing, that's where the trigger starts. That's where like you question yourself. Okay, I'm working for this much time. How am I being productive?
right.
But by the end of the time, like by the end of the time, my manager is going to scold me. So what's actually is happening? I'm spending more time, but it's not getting. So that is
Yeah,
where the stress, the time, the amount of time spent versus the productivity. If it's inversely proportional, that's where the things are going wrong.
got it.
So
Sure.
with these three things, like we'll be able to find out for individual side and on a company level basis. If you,
No,
if I
I want to stop. I want to stop you there,
please,
right?
please, please.
Because before you spill the beans on that, right, I want to take it a level at a time, right? So
Okay.
level zero, individuals,
Uh huh.
you do your own introspection on whether you're able to spend time outside of work in doing things that you like doing, things that your nears and dear expect you to do, right? And I'll be very frank, right? I went through a stage where I mean, my son might be saying something to me, my wife is saying something to me, something's running on the TV, but nothing goes in my head, right? My head is still thinking of something, it's processing something in the background that you're lost in your work world. So it's not like your screen is on, but you're lost. You're still stuck
Exactly.
to the work world, right? So that's your first telltale sign that you are kind of going that downward spiral.
Yeah.
So now let's say I'm a manager, right? I
Okay.
manage a team. I want to kind of take it graded, right? So let's say I'm a young manager, so I have a team of 4 or 5 people I'm managing, right? What kind of tips or what kind of inputs would you give your manager? Would you give this manager so that he or she can start to see these early signs of uh, somebody in their team uh, uh, getting into the grips of this mental well-being issue, right? So what what would be the quick signs that a manager should watch out for, right? And
Yeah.
then part two of this question, how should they handle it? So now if I'm a manager, I've identified that one or two of my team members is going through a downward spiral, right? How do I handle it, right? And how do I differentiate? Because what's also happening is like today is a world of silent quitting, loud quitting, and people just at some point we've had a lot of companies where people just don't stop caring, right, about the company, right? Because
Yeah.
they don't feel connected to the company and they say, hey, I've done my bit, whether you like it or not, this is all that I'm going to do, right? So that's also happening, right? So how do I differentiate an attitude change of an employee who says like I've stopped caring about the company, I've stopped caring about whether my outcomes matter to the company or not, right? I'm just here till I get my next job, right? How would somebody differentiate that from somebody who's under stress and hence the productivity is dropping?
Got it. So, from the manager's perspective, like one can definitely find if they're taking frequent leaves. Frequent leaves is one of the main alarming factor, because so what happens in a frequent leaves is thing, either people want to rest or people are looking for something, or they're seriously ill, or they are not matlab they're really unwell. So these are the four things like what mostly can happen. But taking leaves or absenteeism is one of the factor, alarming factor, like what a manager can easily find out, because by
Right,
the end of it, like he has to take permission from a manager to take leave. and how obvious it has been. Just if you just put a graph to the previous quarter to the current quarter, you'll be knowing it for sure.
Right,
Where
right,
actually the individual is actually standing in terms of absenteeism.
right, right,
That's one thing. And second thing, it's an obvious thing to find out how actually the productivity, how much actually this person is able to contribute to the team.
right,
At the start of, for example, like we use this word called honeymoon phase, like where if a company, if a person is joined in the company, like they'll be very enthusiastic and like they work a
right,
lot, they give everything, but
correct,
after 3 months they fizzle out and like they actually slow down. And
right,
that's you. And then the manager can consider, okay, this person have joined at an X stage and he has become X by half, X by 2, but right now he's become X by 4.
right,
So that X by 2 to X by 4 is the thing, like where actually managers have to find out. And how can they find out? Speak to their team leaders and also engage with the team. What's actually happening? Do they need something? That,
right, right.
that's one of the main questions. And how a manager can address these issues, definitely, especially I'm answering this from the perspective of remote working. So in remote working, what happens? Like how much you are engaging with your team, how
Mm,
much actually you know the people like who are working along with you. Because
right,
I heard many companies mentioning me, and also I actually look the things from both the sides, from the employee side and also the employer side, where an
right,
employee have clearly mentioned me, Tarun, I don't know like whom I'm reporting to, but I've left the company.
right,
That has literally happened because of the remote work. It's happened
right,
because there's no engagement.
right, right.
Because there are companies like who are doing superb in a remote work, and there are companies like who are not able to do even on a complete in office setup also.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
there are both the extremes are there. And what is the main factor, like what is lacking here? It's the engagement part, and how engaging you are, like how reachable you are as a manager to your employees.
Absolutely.
That's one question. That's one solution, like what actually you can do. Start engaging with your people. Second thing, make sure you're addressing their solutions, like their problems, with the proper solutions. For example,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm coming up with Shamsa with some sort of an issue for me, how quickly you're responding to me. It's the same thing. Just consider like your employee as your customer. If a
Got
customer,
it.
if he or she is not getting reply from your customer success team within a limited time span, they're gonna leave. They're gonna leave the company. They're gonna find another competitor of yours.
True, true, very true.
These two are the best things like what a manager can do. So that's why, because according to our in the last 1 year of working, speaking with so many HR professionals, very closely working with few companies, I've actually found these two things have actually changed a lot.
Right, right.
When
So, but
people,
I want to kind of counter
please,
this. I mean, not I won't say counter, but I want to kind of go deeper in this, right?
please.
So, by the time a manager starts, so in my opinion, a leave, somebody's absenteeism, right, or taking leaves regularly, right, might still be too late in the game, right? And for somebody to actually see productivity loss consistently again might be too late in the game, right?
Okay,
So the reason is like, I mean, again, there will, I mean, even the best performer cannot be performing uh, at
every
their
quarter.
best for all the time, right? So there
Yeah,
might
yeah.
be ups and downs for various reasons, right? So not just stress and well-being issues, right? Secondly, like absenteeism also, like you said, right? If they're really ill or they've come to a point where their body and mind is not able to take this, right? And they say, hey, and or somebody in their family says, hey, you're just going overboard, right? Now take a break, right? You need a break, right? So it's still, I still feel so. Like I want to kind of make it a little simpler, right? I'm a manager. I'm talking to my team almost every day or almost every alternate day, right? Talking, chatting, slacking, whatever you want to call it, right? So I'm doing something, right? I'm conversing with my teams. So what kind of early signs can I see in that conversations that gives me, maybe doesn't conclusively tell me, but gives me a hint in the leave and the productive loss, maybe conclusively tells me that something is wrong, right? But what could give me that early warning signal that something may be wrong with this person? So I might want to do a one-on-one with this person later on, right? So what could be those early warning signs uh, for a manager?
Okay. So as you have asked, like little earlier than that, so
Correct.
I would actually tell them to actually take the surveys, like on an every company will have like pulse checks on a
Right,
regular basis. And
right,
second thing, what actually we suggest with the pulse checks is the stress levels. So with this, like we can tell conclusively what's actually a person is actually going through. This one thing is scientific method, like what actually we can go through. But
Right, right.
if you ask me, Tarun, like I don't want to go for any scientific method. Can I tell whether this person is actually going through? But I have only, as of now, I can get only one thing straight away, is that how much these people are able to contribute as a team
Mm,
in the
mm.
team. Like how is he or she becoming a team player? That is the question. Because once, if you see anybody, that's the start of any company, when they join they'll be very enthusiastic, they will definitely contribute their 200%. But is it fizzling out in the
Right.
next 2 months? Because I'm not going deep down into productivity also, but I'm just telling, are they attending meetings? Are they engaging? Are they reverting your messages? Are they
All right.
replying to the co colleagues? So these are the basic signs like what you look at. But again, these are not the conclusive things. If you want conclusive things, I would actually suggest go for a scientific method, like where actually you can find it. Because scientific methods comes up with an proper answers as well.
True, true, true.
So
Yeah.
that's what like what
Okay, but I think whatever you've said is are very interesting tips, Tarun, right? Because if you see somebody, their engagement levels dropping down, right? They usually are the first to join the call, but then you see that for the last 2 3 weeks they're not joining the call on time, right?
yeah,
So the enthusiasm levels has dropped, right? Or they're not responding to the images. I mean, the response, I mean, the messages on time. I think these are good early warning indicators, right? Any disease, right? You look for those
yeah,
early warning indicators, right? Because some diseases, by the time you scientifically test and find out, it may be too late, right? You are
yeah,
in cancer stage 2. What should you do, right? Scientifically, only now you can find it out, right? So diabetes, you can only find out when you have it, right? So those early warning indicators do help, and these are like, uh, but again, like I think the point that you're trying to say, take it with a pinch of salt. Don't start to suspect everybody who's
exactly.
joining the call to have stress and say, "Hey, boss, you should go see a psychiatrist right away." You
exactly,
don't
exactly.
you don't jump the gun and start acting weird when you see the early warning indicators. Fair
Exactly,
point, right? So,
exactly.
so
That is
look,
where, yeah, sorry. That is where, like, actually we suggest companies to go for an stress service like quarterly basis, because you don't actually spend so much of time in this, because it's gonna take like around, it's gonna be a basic questionnaire like 10 to 15 minutes time. And like people like us gonna find out and tell you the things what's actually happening with your company, and that's it. And why I tell quarterly basis, because pulse checks are gonna happen monthly, bi-monthly, this thing. But this quarterly service is gonna help you to understand, and it will also help you to understand whether to scale your company or not also. Because this is one thing where you want to hire or fire people, which
right,
we
right,
actually suggest. Don't fire the people, rather than like trying them more, give them the coaching, give them actually. Right now, I recently part of been another conversation on LinkedIn. I just want to share like one bit of it, where
sure,
actually people, a senior manager like was actually looking for a role, looking to hire a person for a sales manager kind of a thing. So these people, and there are people, there are account executives like who are actually very well experienced in the company, but they're looking outside.
right,
So what happens at this level is like the people like who are actually part of that culture, part of your vision in the company. If you actually give them that one ladder, one step to actually climb up, that is where things are going to change.
right,
Because
right,
once they consider, okay, this is my company, this company values my well-being, this company
right.
values my way of like working,
Got it.
then obviously that employee is going to be your forever employee. So that's how things are going to work.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Those are very valid other points, right? As to everybody is in a job or a role for their own personal growth, right? When they see that the company is able to acknowledge that and then give them the opportunities to grow,
Exactly.
certainly, certainly. So one of the things that I tell my lead is like when a new team member joins, we try to set them up for success, right?
Okay.
How do we make this person win the first deal fast, when very quick, right? I mean, how do you give a environment that this person can come and then show them, prove it to themselves and prove to the team that they add value, right? So set them up for success, right? And nobody wants to. I mean, as a manager, as a leader, you don't want your team members to fail, which means that indirectly it's going to impact, directly it's going to impact you. But at the same time, how do you set them up for success, give something that they can immediately come and then show that they can add value to the team, right? Then you kind of notch up the complexity levels, then you notch up the uh, uh, challenges to them, right? But the initial couple of weeks to a month, we try to see how do we create an opportunity for them to win. right? And be satisfied that they're able to crack something in a new role in a new department or a new company, right? I think those are very valid points you mentioned, Tarun. So you in the previous answer to my previous question, right? You talked about there are some companies that do employee engagement, well-being, and handle mental health-related issues really well, in spite of being remote. And I use the word "in spite" very consciously here because those are the companies that actually can slip and fall quite easily, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Whereas you also said that there are companies that even in spite of being in office, they still have challenges with it, right? Without naming them, right? Could you talk about maybe a few companies that do this really well, right? Uh, uh, from what have you read, some of what have you seen as case studies, or companies that you have worked with in the past, right? Can you give like what do they do well? What kind of things that the best practices that we all of us can learn from such companies?
definitely. So matlab, in this specific question, like I can take the example of Atlassian. I don't. So Atlassian is one company which will actually have given everything to their employees. Let it be employee well-being, counseling sessions, one-on-ones, retreats, everything. They literally spent a lot of money on their employees just to retain them, just to make sure their productivities are going very high, and that has really worked for them.
Right,
If you see anywhere, like when you type actually on Google the best employee well-being company, Atlassian will be there in the list for sure. That's one
right.
thing, like what I look at and like what I read a lot of their blogs and everything. Second company is Buffer. So why I actually take Buffer is because it's a B2C company where the CAC is like very high. Cost of acquisition is very high, and people have to do a lot of marketing, burn a lot of cash. At this time, also in this at this particular moment, also they are able to spend a lot of thing on their employee well-being. They actually care a lot of their employees by provide actually meditation, yoga, employee well-being services, social well-being, financial well-being. They do all types of well-being. So Buffer is that actually Atlassian and Buffer are the, for me it's a go to companies, like where I look at
So
how.
they're gold standards for that.
Yeah, exactly. And apart from that, we have a legend, Google itself, who I think.
Can you take an Indian example? Because I kind of I mean I of these as well, but any Indian company that has come to your attention.
Okay, Indian company. I would actually tell the company. I don't know Recro. Like I don't know whether it's an Indian company or an abroad company exactly. But Recro has this. I actually had one of my friends actually working over there, and also I actually recently had a conversation with the HR over there. So where they have clearly mentioned, Tarun, we are really happy for what we are doing because daily they take out 10 minute session. Daily they take out how much ever busy they are, they take 10 minute wellness sessions every day.
Okay, okay,
That they are doing it from the past 3 years.
okay.
Even though their COVID has happened before COVID, after COVID, these people are doing it every day, day in and day out for 10 minutes. So just
Right,
consider
right.
like how much it impact the productivity of the employees.
Got it.
We
Yeah,
understand. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll probably take a few examples that I've come across, right? So again, these are companies that we work with as well, right? So I think the first step, and I know this is a shameless plug that I'm putting in, but I have to put it because I think it's an important aspect of well-being per se, right? Is that 100% remote is also a root cause of these stress levels being high, right? I mean, socializing, being in person certainly helps. Certainly eases out the friction between teams. In fact, one of the leaders from a large SaaS company that I was talking about, right? So she told me that hey, this person sounded very reserved, he didn't look engaged, right? Because he or she would not respond well on the chat messages, right? But then they would do the work and go, right? They were very aloof from the pack, right? But when we got to meet that person, when I got to meet this person in real life at a co-working space, then I could really understand what's behind this person, right? Because when you're remote, right, you're only like you're talking to each other only when there's work involved, there's an issue involved, or there's a deadline involved, right? You're only talking very transactionally, right? You get very little time to understand the person behind, right? Their working style, right? Why do they communicate less? In fact, it happened in my own team when after like a long time, we did our yearly offsite a few weeks back, right? And there's one person in the team that everybody had a different opinion on, right? But then all of their opinions changed, right, when they met this person in real life, right? And they could really understand why is this person this way, right? And they also, hey, this person is not a very reserved person, right? When you get to know him, he opens up, right? So personally, right, I find that the personal and a lot of companies have started to do this, like offsites that you talked about, retreats that you talked about, right? And some companies that work with us, they do monthly co-working days, right, where they bring all the employees in that city to one place and they try to create a friendly atmosphere for each of them to know each other well and so on and so forth, right? To build that belonging, to build that connections, right, as they call it, right? That's certainly helping, right? Many companies that I'm seeing doing, and there are companies that are like kind of every month. I think there's one company that I spoke to, Plate IQ. They do social games very regularly. Once a month, they're doing multiplayer games where the friction dissipates, right? When you somebody who you usually have a rough time on the call or on Slack, but you're partnering with them to do a strategy game, right? So that certainly eases out the friction between the people, right? And anticipating the friction uh, on and off is certainly helping bringing down the stress levels. So now getting into the last section of or last question of our session, Tarun, right? Lot has changed in the last couple of years, right? I mean, COVID, like you said, has been the spark plug that ignited a lot of these questions, a lot of these. The focus has come onto this topic, right? What do you see from here, right? And again, I do really want to see, in fact, both for the remote work and for these topics, right? We seldom find an Indian company as a gold standard there, right? A lot of us, I think, probably are happy implementing it, but we've not documented it the way Buffer, Atlassian, Doist, and all these companies are documenting this and putting it out, right? We've been pretty bad at documenting such things and being an example for somebody else. And as long as it works for us, we're happy with that, right? But I would love to, what do you think is a trend, right? What do you think is the future that all of us should expect in this space, right? Um, how do you how do you see these wellness and be intertwined with the way of life in policies and the work culture, right? What do you see what do you see what do you foresee as the changes that will happen at workplaces in the next couple of years?
Got it. So this thing I would take actually help of like the surveys or the readings, like whatever I've done, because as a human I can't foresee anything, but I can only expect and like expect on the reports and like tell that things. So right now, like what's happening, the trend in investment in employee well-being is been literally going lit. People as companies are spending a lot because they literally understood when the great resignation have actually started it, where
Right,
people are
right,
literally leaving the companies and going off. That has actually hit the employees, hit the employers to actually retain the employees.
right,
And
right,
they are seeing employee well-being programs as one of the go-to solutions for them,
right,
apart from salary hikes, apart from rate rates, all these things. So employee well-being programs is one of the main things, like what they look at it. And second thing, obviously, if you see any companies like who have done very good in the last few years, they have like one or the other employee well-being programs for sure. Let it be they would have this counseling sessions, they would have meditation, they'll have some sort of memberships, they would have done some sort of thing such that they can retain their employees. So what happens is right now the cost of finding a replacement is much more higher than the person like who is leaving the company.
right.
So
For
when
sure,
that
yeah.
kind of a scenario actually happens, people are okay with spending a lot on it. And apart from that, if you want me to put a start around it or something, I would actually tell the market is growing around like $40 billion, like which is around 24% on a CAGR. It's actually growing the employee well-being as a market as
Market,
usual.
yeah.
Yeah. And apart from that, to add like whatever I've mentioned, the companies, as you clearly mentioned, there are many Indian companies who are actually doing it. For example, I have done, we have done for an Unisol Communication, that's around like 30-40 employee company, but it's there from very long. Bricken, we can consider that's a very old company, but they are coming up and doing things for their employees.
Right,
But they have never showed like where they have never came up documenting anything that we have done or something, and they have got very good retainment of the employees.
right, right,
And For example, I would also take example of GoFloaters also, because you have very lean team, but if you see the work culture, like if you see the working of the productivity of our employees has been very good right now. So these are the things like what actually people have to concentrate a lot. And when it comes to direct well-being as a market, people are talking a lot on regarding this thing.
Hmm, for sure. Yeah.
People are actually wanting this thing, and that's where the right now the phase would be starting from wanting to need. So once it hit the stage of need, everybody wants this thing.
Got it. Got it. Sure. And again, I think it's going to be like I mean, it's going to be today probably the employers have realized, right, that I mean, like you said, it's a good to have. It's probably they're realizing that at least ignoring they've gotten to the good to have stage, right? But like you said, it will become a must to have stage, right? And it will also become I also foresee that it will become employees will start to look at this as a criteria for joining a new company, right? What do they
100%.
do, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just the salary and the packages and all that, right? So employees are already looking at flexibility to work, right? Or workplace flexibility is an important criteria, right? So in fact, all the Indian job portals are also saying that the number of applications for a remote job is kind of increasing, right? Very similarly, I think I'm sure at some point in time in the future, near future itself, employers or prospective employees will also start to look at the well-being activities conducted by companies and benchmark these companies against this, and that would become a criteria for them to join or not join a company.
Yeah, definitely. Because I would actually put this in a number game. I would tell you, because in USA what has actually happened is, for every $1 you spend on your employee, you get like $4 ROI.
Right,
So
right.
that's a very huge margin. Like it's around like 300% return on investment. Sorry if
Yeah,
my
yeah.
math is wrong, but yeah. So like if for $1 you're getting like $4 ROI, and moreover the point is like around 70% of the employees choosing the companies like who are actually providing the well-being programs versus the non-employee well-being programs companies.
Got yeah, yeah,
Because as you clearly mentioned me that people while choosing the companies they have become choosing, it's not that companies choosing the employees are
yeah,
choosing the companies.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
when
True,
actually an employer is able to give them, apart from salary, apart from good salary, if you are able to provide all these things as an additions this thing, then that's going to be a huge hit for the company. Because by the end of it, like any company can grow to its peak level only because of their employees, and employees are the main people, are the pillars of the company.
sure, sure. Sure. So I think I mean coming wrapping up quickly on this session, Tarun. Right, a few takeaways for me. I just want to summarize this so that one, it stays in my brain for longer, and also for people who are watching this. Right. So I think one clear takeaway is that uh, size of the company does not matter. Right. Even smaller companies are getting to do this, and there are like you did it for us, right? And it can be done remotely. You don't have to be physically together to do this. So one is that you don't have to wait. Hey, I'm not big enough for me to start looking at employee well-being. There's no big enough, right? You're more than you and your co-founder. You hire the first employee. You have to start thinking about this. Number one, right? Number two, you gave us a lot of simple telltale signs or watch out alarm signs that an individual can look at, a manager of a team, small team can start looking at as things, and at an organization level, data trends that you can look at to kind of identify if there is a problem at store, right? If something is cooking under the belly of your organization, right? Three, you talked about some structure in terms of strategy, in terms of quarterly doing assessment, right? Understanding this, right? And formally introducing some of these well-being programs into the charter of the organization, right? Counseling, meditation sessions, and how do you bring this right before it becomes a problem? How do you address it? Prevention is better than cure, right? And lastly, you talked about some best practices that other companies are implementing I mean, across the world. But like I said, we would love to hear more Indian examples, and maybe Wanderfly is that going to be the change agent that's going to bring more stories
Thank you
out
so much
into the
for that.
market? And how can you learn from that? And lastly, it's certainly like you said, it's changing from good to have a need to a want, or a want to a
Want to
need, right?
remain, yeah.
So that's happening. So and that's something that I mean leaders of organizations should take conscious awareness of in kind of putting this forward. And again, shout out to you and your team, Tarun, on the awesome work that you've done. In fact, uh, I spotted you, or I got to know you from a very impressive guide that you and your team had put together
Thank you
that
so
I
much.
came across. So definitely a lot of educative content that you're putting out. For the rest of them who are watching, check out their website. You'll find a lot of interesting blogs and guides and tools and tricks that you can kind of look at it. And Tarun is available for on LinkedIn to connect with,
Yeah, yeah,
to engage him and his team in the
yeah.
program.
And I just want to tell one line which we have actually which we are happy to actually tell, and I thought this would be the right platform to actually tell along with you. That is, we are building a tech tool around this thing, the same thing like whatever we are coming
Right,
up,
right.
and we are actually launching it by the end of September first week.
Super.
And
Okay.
which would be a Slack integration where you don't need to download something, you don't need to do anything. It's just a plug and play button, like where you can just integrate that thing and integrate with your Slack. And will make sure, and you're gonna get the HR. Especially this is a thing for HRs. You don't need to worry about the financial stress levels of the employees. You don't need to worry about your productivity of your employees, because we're gonna do this everything with that one single tool, and we're gonna
Right,
do
right.
this for the engagement as well.
Super,
Yeah,
super. Great. I think that's a way to go, right? That's a way to kind of use short interventions and short. I mean surveys and CSATs and all. Are, I think they are all history, right?
yeah.
Pulse checks and quick Q&A, checking the pulse is the way to go, and integration is certainly the way to go, rather than kind of doing old stuff. So great. I think Tarun, I'm looking forward to your growth and the kind of innovations that you and your team bring to the table on this. I'm happy to have chatted with you, and thanks for sharing some of these tips because uh, I think, I mean, more than we all recognize this is a problem, right? But we all also need crude case to identify the problem exists in your teams, right? Before it becomes too late, right? And for every startup that every employee, like if you're a 20-member team, one employee leaving is like a chunk of your talent leaving, right? You can't let your early employees leave for this reason, right? And certainly, smaller the company, more value every employee is to you,
Exactly.
and it certainly matters to you. It should matter to you as a leader. So thanks for bringing that up, and happy to have chatted, and thanks for sharing this information. And I look forward to your more engaging content from your team in the future.
Thank you so much for actually having me on this. And GoFloaters is actually really doing a damn work, because I want to tell one line, because I'll just give my own experience like like taking the service from GoFloaters. And I'll clearly tell you, this is not some marketing trick or something to all the guys like who are listening. I want to be very clear at this. But what happened is, like, our team wanted a space on an immediate basis because we are having a client meeting, which are in between the spaces, like where it's a complete rush. I know, like, people who are in Bangalore, they'll be able to understand the traffic here.
Right.
So that's where, like, we actually downloaded the application, like found out, like, okay, I'll give a go with the Go Floaters. I'll see, like, what can be done. That's where, like, we have quickly found out a space, like, I think within just 30 minutes, I think the team of Go Floaters have actually contacted me and, like, helped me to find a space. That's how these people are doing. And obviously, one more point is that the way, like, Go Floaters are working, bringing the different companies, different employees all together under one roof, that
Right.
actually is a major solution for your employee well-being, guys. This I can definitely tell you, because you just go and see any workspaces, like meeting new people. It gives a
No,
completely a
absolutely. There's
different rush.
nothing better than we are all humans and social beings as a foundational DNA, right? So yeah, certainly we see that it helps there. So thanks, Tarun. Thanks for the shout out, and I know that you every word that you meant it really,
It's yes, sir.
right? Yeah. So thank you, and looking forward to more engaging conversations with you, and all the best for your product launch, and all the best for your future engagement with your clients as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Have a great
Thanks.
day ahead. Bye bye.
Good evening. Thanks. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.